There are rooms you were never invited into, Capricorn. But everything in those rooms was about you. Behind closed doors, a small group gathered. Not to celebrate you. Not to support you. But to figure out how you've become so untouchable. You weren't there to speak. You weren't there to explain. You didn't defend yourself, offer clarity, or raise your voice. And yet, you were the only presence that filled that entire space. Their eyes shifted uncomfortably. Their voices dropped into cautious tones. And one person, the loudest among them before the meeting, left in complete silence, with a weight of disappointment that didn't come from your failure, but from your refusal to fail. Capricorn, let this settle in your bones. Your growth was the trigger. Your silence was the mirror. And your rise was the earthquake they didn't see coming. They met in secret. But it's not because you were weak. It's because you became too powerful to ignore. You've outgrown the old roles they wrote for you. You've stepped beyond the narrative they used to control you. And now, they don't know what to do with the version of you who no longer waits for permission. You didn't ask for their opinion. But still, your name is in their mouths. Not as a compliment. Not as a blessing. But as a challenge. This isn't a message about revenge. This isn't about proving them wrong. This is about something deeper. Why your quiet rise is the most dangerous power they've ever underestimated. And in this video, you'll discover who that disappointment really belongs to, why your absence reveals their true nature, and how the universe is using their whispers to confirm your calling. So stay until the end, because what was said in that room is about to reveal what the universe wants you to see next. And it changes everything. Part 1. The meeting without you, a cosmic design. There are moments in life when something unfolds entirely in your absence, but somehow, you are still the center of it all. Conversations you weren't present for. Decisions you weren't consulted on. Gatherings where your name came up, not by accident, but as the focus. Capricorn, there was such a meeting. You were not invited. You didn't walk into the room. You didn't speak. But every word that filled the air revolved around you. And this wasn't a coincidence. This was cosmic design. You see, the universe doesn't always place you where your name is being mentioned. Sometimes, it removes you so truth can rise without your presence interrupting it. Because if you had been there, if you had walked into that space, you would have tempered the atmosphere. You would have remained composed, spoken with caution, protected others' dignity even while yours was being stripped in silence. You would have played the role you always play, the strong one, the level-headed one, the builder of peace in a room full of dissonance. But this time, the universe didn't want peace. It wanted revelation. So you were removed. And in your absence, their masks began to slip. What was hidden beneath polite smiles became visible. What was once coated in flattery, now surfaced as envy. What was disguised as concern, revealed itself as control. The gathering they imagined would define you, actually dismantled them. Because without you to perform for, they exposed their true relationship to you. They don't dislike you, Capricorn. They fear what you've become. Not because you've harmed them, but because you no longer need them. They gathered thinking they could evaluate you. But the only thing that got revealed was their own fear of irrelevance. They expected to discuss a version of you who still sought their approval. A version of you who still looked back to ask for permission. A version of you who would shrink to fit their comfort zones. But that version of you no longer exists. And when the truth of that hit the room, it became impossible to pretend. Some tried to downplay you. Some stayed silent, hoping no one would ask their real opinion. But one person left that room deeply unsettled. They didn't speak a word as they exited. But the disappointment they carried wasn't about your failure. It was about the realization that you succeeded without them. They realized you no longer walk in the script they wrote for you. And this is the moment the universe has been preparing you for. Because not all absence is rejection. Some absences are sacred space where truth is revealed in your silence, not your defense. And Capricorn, your silence has spoken. It told the truth they weren't ready to hear. It ended the chapter they refused to close. It proved what they secretly feared. You no longer belong to the version of yourself they feel safest with. Life lesson. You don't need to be in every room where your name is mentioned. Your absence has power. Your silence reveals what your presence might have hidden. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let them speak without you so the universe can hear who they really are. Part 2. The disappointed one and why their pain isn't yours. In every secret meeting, there's always one person who walks away heavier than when they arrived. Not because the conversation exposed your flaws, but because it shattered the illusion they had carefully built about you. Capricorn, that person left not with power, not with clarity, but with a silent, bitter disappointment. And let's be clear, that disappointment is not yours to carry. They didn't walk out of that room saddened by something you did to them. They walked out shaken by what you've become without them. You see, people who build their identity around being your guide, your gatekeeper, or your voice of reason, quietly believe they are necessary for your growth. They convince themselves that without their approval, you wouldn't know where to go. That without their insight, your vision would stay blurred. But what happens when you prove otherwise? What happens when you grow in silence? What happens when you outpace the limits they gently tried to impose on you? What happens when the version of you they loved, the one who looked to them for advice, disappears, and in its place rises someone they can no longer influence? That is the kind of disappointment they carry now. Not disappointment in you, but disappointment in their own powerlessness. You no longer lean on them. You no longer look back. And that frightens them more than anything you could have ever said. Because the truth is, Capricorn, they were never prepared for you to become whole without them. They liked the version of you that was talented but hesitant, strong but still seeking, wise but waiting. But now, you are neither seeking nor waiting. You've stopped asking for directions. You've stopped explaining every step. You've stopped needing their validation. And in doing so, you've quietly dismantled the role they assigned themselves in your life. That's why they feel lost. That's why their heart sank when your name was brought up. They weren't grieving a betrayal. They were grieving the end of their control. Capricorn, this is where your inner strength must speak clearly. You are not responsible for their heartbreak over a role you never asked them to play. They made themselves essential in your story, but it was an illusion. You didn't need them to be who you are. You never did. And now that you're rising on your own terms, their illusion is crumbling. The scaffolding they built around your identity has collapsed. And the foundation you laid for yourself, quietly, steadily, over time, is what remains. Do not confuse their sadness for your mistake. Do not mistake their disappointment as your debt. They are grieving their loss of power, not your loss of purpose. And that is a grief you are not required to fix. Life lesson. Sometimes, people mourn not because you left them behind, but because you stopped needing what they were never meant to offer. Their pain is not your guilt. Their disappointment is not your responsibility. Let them carry what is theirs, and walk forward with what is truly yours, freedom. Part 3. The silence that spoke louder than words. There is a kind of silence that isn't empty. It doesn't mean absence. It doesn't mean retreat. And it certainly doesn't mean weakness. Capricorn, your silence is not a void. It is a statement. A deliberate, potent declaration that those who once tried to shape your identity can no longer reach you, and they know it. Because when you stopped explaining, they panicked. When you stopped defending, they got louder. And when you walked forward without turning back, they finally understood something they were never prepared to face. You no longer belong to their version of your story. For years, perhaps even decades, you've been the one to smooth the sharp edges. You've softened your truth to preserve someone else's comfort. You've held your tongue so that others wouldn't feel small in the presence of your strength. You've offered patience, clarity, and understanding even when none of it was returned. But there comes a time when silence becomes the only language left. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what needs to be said is no longer up for negotiation. When you went quiet, something profound happened. The energy shifted. The balance of power changed. And for those who depended on your words to maintain control, your silence was a spiritual earthquake. It unsettled the ones who relied on your explanations to feel superior. It rattled those who needed your reactions to feel relevant. It terrified the people who only knew how to manipulate a version of you that still responded. Because here's what they don't want to admit. They counted on your need to be understood. They depended on your compulsion to clarify. They knew that as long as you kept talking, they could twist your words to keep the story in their favor. But when you chose silence, they lost the script. No more clarifications. No more justifications. No more exhausting yourself trying to earn the approval of people who were never willing to offer it. Your silence became the boundary they couldn't cross. It became the wall between your current self and the version they hoped would never evolve. They mistook your quiet for hesitation. They thought your pause meant confusion. But they were wrong. Your silence wasn't a delay, it was a decision. The decision to no longer participate in dynamics that drain you. The decision to protect your peace instead of proving your point. The decision to let them sit with their own discomfort instead of rescuing them from it. And in doing so, you took back your power not with fury, but with stillness. You are no longer moved by noise. You no longer feel the need to respond to every whisper. You no longer build your life around the need to be seen through someone else's distorted lens. And that, Capricorn, is what they truly fear. Because now, they can no longer shape your story. They can only observe it from a distance they created. Life lesson. Silence, when chosen with intention, is not retreat. It is mastery. It is the moment you stop being someone others can manipulate and start becoming someone only destiny can move. Your quiet is not weakness. It is sacred strength, the kind that speaks volumes without making a sound. Part 4. The boxes they tried to keep you in. People don't just fear your strength, Capricorn. They fear that your strength doesn't need them anymore. That's why, from the beginning, some tried to keep you contained not out of cruelty, but out of their own discomfort with your potential. They built boxes around your identity. Small, manageable roles. Silent expectations. Unspoken rules about how far you could go, how loud you could be, how much you were allowed to want. And for a long time, maybe you played along. Not because you believed you belonged in those boxes, but because you were taught that peace was better than disruption. That quiet was safer than clarity. That agreement was more loving than truth. So you dimmed your fire. You reduced your brilliance. You took up less space than you were meant for, just to keep others from feeling threatened by your light. They mistook your humility for limitation. They confused your restraint with incapability. And they told themselves that you'd always stay where they placed you. Quiet, compliant, cooperative. But then, you outgrew the box. Not in an explosion. Not with fanfare. You simply kept evolving one silent breakthrough at a time. You stopped asking for approval before taking your next step. You stopped shrinking your voice to maintain the illusion of harmony. You stopped holding back your ideas, your vision, your fire. And that's when the fear began. Because the boxes they put you in weren't just about control. They were about comfort, their comfort. You stepping outside of them meant they'd have to confront what they never developed in themselves. Your growth illuminated their stagnation. Your resilience revealed their avoidance. And your self-trust exposed their dependency on your silence. The very thing they said was too much about you. Was the part of you that was finally becoming whole. They called you difficult because you had boundaries. They called you cold because you no longer tolerated manipulation. They called you selfish the moment you stopped playing the role they cast you in. But here's the truth they will never say out loud. You didn't become too much. You simply became too honest to pretend anymore. You were never meant to live in someone else's container. You were never designed to make yourself smaller so others could feel taller. You are the architect of your own structure, and it was never meant to fit within their blueprint. And now, standing outside those boxes, you're not angry, you're free. Free to speak. Free to lead. Free to exist in your full power without waiting for permission. They don't know what to do with that version of you. But you do. You keep building. Life lesson. Any box that asks you to shrink is not a home, it's a prison. The moment you stop shrinking for others is the moment you begin expanding into the person you were always meant to be. Let their discomfort be a sign you're finally stepping into your true form. Part 5. Why your growth terrifies them. Capricorn, let's name the truth they don't want to admit. Your growth terrifies them. Not because you've hurt them. Not because you've done anything wrong. But because your existence has become a reminder of everything they chose not to become. You kept going when others stopped. You kept building when others got tired. You kept believing in something bigger even when no one stood beside you. And now, your quiet evolution has exposed their quiet resignation. They see in you a mirror. But it doesn't reflect their greatness, it reflects their avoidance. Every step forward you take reminds them of the steps they never had the discipline to follow through. Every boundary you hold reminds them of all the times they betrayed their own values to stay accepted. Every risk you take reminds them that they stopped growing a long time ago. And that kind of reflection is unbearable, especially when it comes from someone they once believed they were ahead of. Because Capricorn, many of them never imagined you'd pass them. They underestimated you, quietly, consistently, over time. They thought your silence meant you lacked vision. They thought your stillness meant you lacked courage. They mistook your patience for permission to lead you, correct you, or even define you. But you were never behind. You were simply rooted. And rooted things grow deeper before they grow taller. Now that you're rising, they're trying to process what your success means for their story. Because if you, the one they labeled as too quiet, too reserved, too rigid, are becoming everything they claimed wasn't possible without them, then what does that say about their choices? What does that say about the years they spent playing it safe? What does that say about the time they spent measuring your pace, rather than tending to their own? Your rise doesn't just challenge their perception of you, it challenges their perception of themselves. And for some, that's a crisis they aren't prepared to face. So they turn their discomfort into projection. They twist their envy into criticism. They frame your independence as arrogance. They pretend your distance is betrayal, when it's really self-respect. But the deeper truth is this. You didn't change in a way that hurt them. You changed in a way that revealed them. And that revelation has become their discomfort, not your burden. They wanted you to grow, but only on terms they could control. They supported your progress as long as it didn't surpass theirs. They cheered for your success until it stopped needing their help. And now that you no longer orbit their influence, their insecurity is louder than their support ever was. Capricorn, don't confuse their fear for a reason to stop. Don't shrink just to soothe the ones who refuse to evolve. Because your growth isn't the problem. It's the proof. Life lesson. Your evolution will always provoke those who've chosen comfort over courage. Don't slow down to make others feel better about standing still. Keep growing, not to prove them wrong, but to stay true to the version of you that refused to stay stuck. Part 6. What they feared most was losing power over you. Some people don't fear your success. They fear your success without them. Capricorn, the deepest fear they carry is not that you'll fail. It's that you'll rise beyond their reach. Because once you stop needing them, they lose the power they never should have had in the first place. This isn't about hatred. It's about control. Control they once held through soft manipulation. Control they maintained through subtle comments, suggestions masked as concern, advice wrapped in doubt. They never told you directly to slow down. They just made you feel guilty when you moved faster than them. They never said you couldn't grow. They just made it clear they wouldn't be happy for you if you did it without their guidance. Capricorn, for a long time, they believed they were the invisible hand shaping your path. They saw themselves as the silent force behind your decisions. As if your discipline, your vision, your quiet tenacity somehow belonged to them. And maybe you let them believe it, for a time. Maybe you honored their role, respected their voice, even allowed them to influence your process. But then something shifted. You realized they weren't guiding you, they were guarding their relevance. They weren't supporting you, they were trying to stay central to a story that was never theirs to lead. They believed their presence was essential. That your steps required their approval. That without them, you wouldn't know how to move. And then one day, you moved anyway. You moved without asking. You made a decision without their input. You took a step that didn't include them. And something cracked inside of them. It wasn't rage. It wasn't betrayal. It was powerlessness. That quiet collapse of control is what they've been grieving ever since. Because for them, your independence was never just growth, it was loss. They didn't lose your love. They didn't lose your kindness. They lost their imagined role as the one who could shape your path. And here's the truth, Capricorn. They never truly supported your freedom. They supported the version of you who still needed their permission. So when you stopped asking, they felt erased. When you stopped justifying, they felt threatened. When you stopped explaining, they felt powerless. But that power was never theirs to begin with. And it's not your job to help them grieve the illusion they built for themselves. You didn't take anything from them. You simply walked into your truth. And that truth no longer fits within their shadow. Life lesson. People who depend on your dependence will always call your freedom a betrayal. But you are not here to make others feel important at the cost of your own evolution. You are here to stand in your sovereignty even if it breaks the false stories others wrote about who you were supposed to be. Part 7. The Power of Strategic Distance. Capricorn, one of the most misunderstood choices you've made is the distance you've created. To the untrained eye, it looks cold. It looks detached. It looks like you're pushing people away. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Because the space you've created is not about rejection. It's about preservation. Preservation of peace. Preservation of purpose. Preservation of the identity you fought to reclaim, piece by piece, silence by silence. You didn't create distance to punish anyone. You created it to finally breathe. See, there comes a time when you realize that some environments will never allow you to grow. That certain dynamics will always demand your compliance before they allow your brilliance. And instead of arguing, you chose space. Instead of explaining, you chose silence. Instead of fighting to be heard, you chose to walk away from the noise entirely. Capricorn, this isn't avoidance. It's strategy. Because when you were up close, they couldn't see you clearly. They saw what they wanted to see. They heard what they expected to hear. They responded, not to who you are, but to the version of you they felt safest controlling. So you stepped back. And from that distance, something powerful happened. The illusion collapsed. Your boundaries became visible. Your choices became final. And your silence became louder than any explanation you could have given. You're not distant because you're angry. You're distant because you're aware. Aware that proximity can be toxic when clarity is lost. Aware that some people need you to stay close, not out of love, but out of their own insecurity. Aware that being near them meant continually proving yourself, and that's a burden you no longer carry. Capricorn, the space you've created is sacred. It's where your soul recalibrates. It's where your mind can think without being filtered through someone else's doubt. It's where your spirit can rise without asking for permission. And not everyone is meant to follow you into that space. Some relationships are built only for the version of you that stayed small. Some connections are addicted to the dynamics where you always explained yourself. Some people need you to stay within reach because your distance forces them to face themselves. But now, you've made a decision. If your presence requires the betrayal of your truth, then absence is the only honest response. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're not running. You're just finally standing in the clarity that says, I will not contort myself to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. I will not dilute my presence so others can feel bigger in their own story. I will not apologize for protecting what took me years to rebuild. Life lesson. Distance is not disrespect. It is discernment. And when your energy has become too sacred to be wasted in rooms filled with confusion, silence becomes your strength and space becomes your sanctuary. Part 8. The echo of your name in rooms you never entered. Capricorn, your name has power. Not just in the places you've walked, not just in the rooms you've spoken, but in spaces you've never entered, where your name still echoes and your presence is still felt. It's a strange truth, isn't it? To know that conversations are unfolding with your name at the center, while your body is nowhere near. To feel the ripple of energy, as if the atmosphere itself shifts when your story is brought up in hushed tones. without your knowledge, and without your consent. This isn't paranoia. This is energetic fact. Your existence is not passive. Your path is not forgettable. And your energy is not ignorable. There are people who mention you, not out of reverence, but out of restlessness. Because your growth unsettles something inside of them. Your consistency makes them question their own. And your refusal to fold under pressure reveals the fragility they've hidden behind for years. Even when you are silent, you are still the storm in their stillness. Even when you are distant, you are still the voice in their mind they can't quiet. Because deep down, they know. They know you have something they don't. The discipline to rise. The strength to endure. The clarity to move without asking for validation. They may not say it aloud. But it shows. In their curiosity. In their subtle comparisons. In the way your name lingers longer than it should in conversations that don't involve you. And some of them. The ones who once felt superior. The ones who quietly wished for your failure. Are now forced to reckon with the reality that you've outgrown the story they told about you. They see you rising. They see you building. They see you thriving in silence. And they don't understand how you did it without them. Because they believed your power was borrowed. That your direction came from their influence. That your stability was something they helped you maintain. But now, as they speak your name in private, they're forced to accept a truth they never wanted to face. You never needed their permission. You only needed space. And now that you've claimed it, your presence speaks even louder in absence. Capricorn, understand this clearly. Your name echoes not because you demanded attention, but because you became undeniable. You no longer have to announce your intentions. The results are already speaking. You no longer have to justify your direction. Your discipline has proven itself. You no longer have to explain your worth. The silence you carry is louder than the noise they make trying to define you. And that is why they speak. Because deep down, they feel what's coming. They feel the weight of your becoming. They feel the distance between who you were and who you are now. And in that space, your name lives, echoing through their minds, reminding them of the one thing they can't control, the rise of someone they no longer have access to. Life lesson. When your name echoes in rooms you've never entered, it means your energy has transcended physical presence. Your growth has created a legacy that travels without needing to explain itself. Let them talk. Let them wonder. You are no longer shaped by their conversations, you are shaped by your calling. Part 9. The turning point from secret whispers to cosmic confirmation. Capricorn, you've heard the whispers. You've felt the tension in the air when you enter the room. You've sensed the pauses in conversations, the subtle glances, the way people speak in coded language when your name arises. But let's be honest, you've learned to live above it. For a long time, the whispers made you question yourself. You wondered if you were doing too much. You wondered if your silence was being misread. You wondered if, maybe, you really were becoming too distant, too cold, too unapproachable. But then, something shifted. Not around you. Within you. One morning, you woke up and didn't feel the need to explain anymore. One conversation passed where you no longer defended your choices. One situation arose where you didn't respond, and not because you were holding back, but because you were finally at peace with letting them think whatever they wanted. That was the turning point. The moment you realized, their whispers are not warnings. They're confirmations. Confirmation that you've stepped outside the box they placed you in. Confirmation that your growth is too big to be silenced. Confirmation that the version of you they preferred, obedient, predictable, dependent, is long gone. Capricorn, they are not whispering because you failed. They are whispering because you made it. Without their help. Without their approval. Without their permission. You built something stronger than their opinions. And now, their energy can't contain what you've become. This is the cosmic reversal. What once threatened to pull you down now proves how far you've risen. What was once said behind your back now speaks directly to your spirit. You are no longer one of them. You're not participating in the same cycles. You're not playing the same roles. You're not seeking the same validation. You're moving according to a different rhythm. A sacred one. A path not given by them, but carved by you, with every quiet sacrifice, every private discipline, every unseen act of resilience. And now, the universe is confirming it. You're no longer being hidden. You're being revealed. The whispers, they're only growing louder because your light is becoming harder to ignore. And for those who only knew how to manage the dimmed version of you, your full power is confronting. Not because you're aggressive, not because you've changed overnight, but because you're finally refusing to explain the magnitude of your becoming. Let them whisper. Let them project. Let them speculate. You are no longer here to correct their story. You are here to write your own life lesson. Sometimes the whispers are not a sign to retreat, they are the proof that you've already outgrown the need to explain yourself. Let the whispers come. Let them echo. Every word spoken in your absence only strengthens the truth that your presence is now a force far beyond their comprehension. Part 10. Now comes the choice, stay small or keep rising. Capricorn, you've walked through shadows with dignity. You've endured in silence. You've let others talk while you built. You've let others doubt while you stayed the course. But now you stand at a threshold. Not of their making. Not built by their expectations or their limitations, but by the quiet, unshakable momentum of your own becoming. And now comes the question. Will you shrink to soothe their discomfort? Or will you keep rising, even if it leaves some people behind? Because let's be honest, you've already made part of this decision. You've already created the distance. You've already walked away from spaces that once defined you. You've already chosen truth over approval, purpose over popularity, direction over distraction. But now the decision deepens. Now the universe asks for more. Because the next level of your rise will cost more than the last. It will cost comfort. It will cost relationships built on the old version of you. It will cost the illusion that you can grow and still keep everyone at ease. You can't. Your evolution will confront their stagnation. Your clarity will irritate their confusion. Your success will trigger their insecurity. And you must be willing to let it. Because the price of freedom is not just walking away from the cage. It's refusing to go back just because someone else is afraid of the door being open. Capricorn, you are no longer the version of yourself who explains your fire to those who fear being burned. You are no longer softening your truth so others can sit in your light without squinting. You are no longer adjusting your speed to match those who chose to stand still. You've grown. You've stretched. You've seen what's possible when you stop asking for permission. And now you are responsible for protecting that vision, no matter who it makes uncomfortable. They will call it selfish. They will call it dramatic. They will say you've changed. And they're right. You've changed. You've reclaimed your name. You've restructured your boundaries. You've rewritten the rules of engagement, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You've stopped negotiating with the parts of you that once begged to be loved in incomplete ways. Now, you only move forward in alignment. And anything that pulls you out of that, even if it once felt like home, must be released. Not because you don't care, but because caring too much about staying small is the very thing that kept you from becoming whole. Capricorn, this is your sacred crossroads. The decision isn't whether you'll rise, that's already happening. The decision is whether you will continue rising even when others refuse to rise with you. And that is a question only your soul can answer. But if you listen closely, deep beneath the echoes of the past, there is a voice, still, steady, familiar, and it's saying, you were never meant to live in the cage they called comfort. You were always meant to live in the freedom they were too afraid to claim. Life lesson. Every rise comes with a choice, remain small to stay familiar, or expand beyond what others can understand. You do not owe your shrinking to anyone's peace. Your growth is not the threat. Their resistance is not your responsibility. Choose the path that honors your soul even if it costs you the comfort of being understood. Part 11. The fire in your name will silence every whisper. Capricorn, let's pause. Take a breath, a deep one. Because where you are standing now is sacred ground. You've walked through betrayal without bitterness. You've endured doubt without collapse. You've absorbed projections without losing your sense of self. And most of all, you've outlived the version of you that used to seek shelter in other people's approval. Now, there is only truth. Yours. And the whispers that once filled secret rooms, they're fading. Not because they've stopped talking, but because their words no longer hold power. What once felt threatening is now a quiet reminder of how far you've come. You no longer flinch when your name is spoken in your absence. You no longer brace yourself for their opinion, because you know what they never did. Your name carries fire, and fire doesn't need defense, it simply burns through what can't survive in its presence. This fire in you, it's not anger, it's not revenge, it's not about proving them wrong, it's something much deeper. It's the flame of endurance, the glow of clarity, the heat of a soul that has walked through darkness and chosen not to become bitter but luminous. That's why they don't understand you. You didn't fight back. You didn't expose them. You didn't retaliate. You simply rose. And in your rising, you became the answer to questions they never had the courage to ask about themselves. Capricorn, hear this clearly. You do not need to be louder. You do not need to defend the truth of who you are. You do not need to re-enter rooms that once tried to contain you just to prove you've changed. You've already done what they said was impossible. You've already become what they said required their guidance. You've already outgrown the scaffolding they used to hold over your path. And now, you walk freely, not arrogantly, not defiantly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows. Destiny doesn't ask for permission, purpose doesn't wait for applause, and power doesn't answer to whispers. Let them keep their stories. Let them keep their meetings. Let them keep their silence now that you've reclaimed your voice. Because what's unfolding in your life has never belonged to their control. It has always belonged to you and the universe that chose you to carry it. And now it's time to live from that place. No more hesitation. No more shrinking. No more explaining. You've been called forward. And forward is where you will go, whether they approve or not. Life lesson. You were never meant to be defined by whispers. You were meant to be remembered for the fire you carried. Not the words they spoke in your absence, but the light you became in their shadow. This is your legacy. Not one of revenge, not one of performance, but one of truth, of transformation, and of quiet, sovereign power. Final words and call to action. If this message stirred something inside you, you already know what it means. It's time to leave the echo chambers behind. It's time to step into the life you were always meant to build on your terms. And if you're ready to walk that path, you're not alone. You're walking with every Capricorn who chose truth over comfort, silence over chaos, power over approval. Type it in the comments now. My destiny is untouchable. Let it be your covenant, your seal, your reminder that no meeting, no whisper, no disappointed look can rewrite what has already been written for you. Your name is fire, and fire never asks permission to rise. Subscribe now to Zodiac Secrets Revealed, because your silence isn't weakness, it's sacred strategy. And this is just the beginning of what your name is meant to carry. Are you ready to rise without apology? Then we'll see you in the next chapter.